Welcome back. It's Sunday, August the 2nd. We are approaching the end of Module 3, so let's take a look at what we've covered so far. We're going to go through some practice questions that will be very helpful to you on the final exam. The final exam will have a very similar structure. You're expected to be able to perform a custom installation of Linux, navigate the Linux hierarchy, and so on. The individual questions, of course, will be different. Okay, the details will be different in every question, but the overall structure will be something you're familiar with. So let's begin a custom installation. You can see here that it needs to be an older operating system, Fedora 13. In this particular case, 2.4 gigabytes for the virtual memory. If you don't have much system memory on your PC at home, you can go ahead and choose a smaller amount of memory as long as it's at least 1 gigabyte. So 2.4 gigabytes may create problems for some people, but I think for most people it should be fine. And 10.5 gigabytes for the virtual hard drive. You're going to create a regular user called Sam and give him a password of netlab123. Netlab123 will also be the password for the super user. So let's go ahead and begin. I have VirtualBox in front of me. I'm going to go ahead and click New Machine. We'll type Fedora and give it some meaningful names. So these are sample or practice questions. Make sure it's 64-bit. If you have any difficulty at all with this step, contact me and we will try to resolve the difficulty. So the memory again was 2.4 gigabytes. You can pull the slider and get it approximate, or you can just type it in there. 2.4 gigabytes is 2,400 megabytes. And again, it doesn't have to be precise. Get it as close as you can. Now take a good look at this number here. Okay, some of you have 4 megabytes or 4 gigabytes of memory. I have 8, as you can see, and some of you, if you're really lucky, might have more, like 16. So avoid giving more than a quarter of that memory to your virtual machine. Let's go ahead and click Next. We're going to accept the default here, accept the default, accept the default, and here we want 10.5 gigabytes for the virtual hard drive. So I'm just going to type that in, 10.5. If you have trouble, I see it didn't take the point in there, so let me try that again. 10.5 gigabytes. So I'm just going to pull the slider here and try to get it as close as I possibly can. So that's approximately 10.5 gigabytes. We'll go ahead and click Create. And now we will go to the settings for this machine. And you can see here under System, the amount of RAM that we're taking away from the host system and giving to the virtual machine. We're not using any floppy. We're going to uncheck that and push it down the boot sequence. Now, when this virtual machine boots up, it's going to look for an operating system first on the optical drive, then the hard drive. Well, that's fine. It's going to find the installation media and it's going to install. And sometimes what ends up happening, especially when you're installing an older operating system, is it keeps going through that process and you never can get into Linux. So what you want is to have your hard drive first and your optical device second. That way when you boot up, it first goes to the hard drive, doesn't find an operating system, then goes to your ISO file, installs Linux, and then when you shut down and reboot, you will be rebooting from the hard drive. We'll click on Storage next. You can see that our DVD is empty or CD is empty. We've downloaded Fedora 13, so let's go ahead and select that. I have placed it on my desktop, so I'm going to click on my desktop in a folder called Fedora, and I am going to go ahead and select that. Just to explain the numbers to you, the 13 here means it's version 13. I think we're currently up to version 32 or maybe higher for Fedora. The 64 means this is a 64-bit installation media, and the 86, counterintuitively, that means 32-bit. So this is both. This will allow for both a 32-bit and a 64-bit installation. So let's click OK. And now I believe we are ready to install. So let's click OK again. And I'm going to start the machine and run through the process. So if you see this screen right here, you may have to select your installation media, your ISO file. And just read the menu. We're just installing a new system. Press Enter on your keyboard. Now this screen is very important, so please read it carefully. It wants to check your DVD that you're installing from. You have no installation DVD. We're installing from an ISO file. So using the arrow keys on your keyboard, select Skip and press Enter. If you check the media right now, you will get an error message and you will not be able to proceed with the installation. So make sure you skip that step. And we are now at the graphical portion of the installation. We are going to read what's on the screen and follow the instructions. Our language, system language, is English. That could vary on the exam. The keyboard layout, again, US English. Keep in mind these steps may vary on the final exam. The storage technology you're using basic storage, accept the default. This step is important here. Make sure you reinitialize all. Host name, basically the computer name. I might ask you to put a computer name on the final exam. For now, I'm going to just accept the default. And your time zone. Now, people get confused here because they click, they see America, and they start scrolling down. It's actually right in front of you, America, Montreal. We'll click Next and enter the password for the super user. So remember, we're going to use netlab123. Go ahead and confirm it. netlab123 and click Next. And it's just giving us a warning that this is a weak password. You would never use a weak password in a production network, but here we're just simply following the instructions. And it wants to know how to proceed here. If there's an existing Linux system, go ahead and replace it. That's the default. So we will just simply accept the default at this point, but make sure you read through all the other options and that you're familiar with them. And then write your changes to disk. We are now prompted with a list of packages or software that we can install into Linux Fedora. I'm just going to leave Customize Later. That's the default, and click Next. You can see here that the packages are now being copied to the virtual hard drive that we created during the installation. So we've installed 17 packages so far of 1200. This takes a few minutes, so I'm just going to pause it and return to you very shortly when they're all copied and installed to the hard drive. So now all the packages for Linux have been installed and we are prompted to reboot. And after the reboot, we are now in the post install. There's a couple of things we still have to configure, namely the items you see on the left-hand menu. So I click forward, license agreement, create a regular user. So the regular user is Sam. You can enter his full name, just make up any last name. The password will be the same as the super user, netlab123, and we will confirm. Again, we have a warning about a weak password, time and date, hardware profile. It wants to send it back to the Fedora community. We will go ahead and select no, do not send. Linux is now installed. So let's go ahead and log on as the regular user Sam, netlab123. After logging in, we want a bash or terminal window. So we're going to start a bash session. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see here the user that I'm logged on as. If I type pwd, I'm in the home directory for Sam. I'm going to switch user, become a super user, su, same password. You don't see anything as you type, but go ahead, type it anyways. And you can see now that we are logged into this bash or terminal session as the super user, and we are now ready to proceed with the rest of the questions.